let's talk about ancient Rome for a minute. During the time of Christ, the Romans were not that hostile to Christianity. They were only hostile to Judaism when the Jews created some kind of a ruckus or some kind of a problem for the Romans, and then they would put down whatever happened. When Christianity began to spread, the Romans were not particularly hostile at all to Christianity, except when the Jews would instigate problems because of their opposition to Christianity, and that would get, cause such a ruckus that the Roman government would then clamp down, and in some cases, Christians ended up being persecuted simply because of their affiliation with Israel and with Jews, with Judaism. And we see an example of that in Acts when one of the emperors commanded that all Jews must depart from Jerusalem, and it was because the Jews were creating such a ruckus against the Christians that they exiled them all, Jews and Christians, because Christianity was considered a sect of Judaism. And we see these kinds of things happening in the early centuries. Well, then when we get to the time of Nero, things got much worse for Christians during the time of Nero in the 60s of the first century, because Christians were kind of generally hated by the people because of their association with the Jews. But the Great Fire in Rome, which destroyed a good portion of the city of Rome, was blamed by Nero on Christians simply because they were a convenient target to deflect the fact that Nero had started the fire himself in order to clear out some area that he wanted to build in. And the fire got out of control, but he blamed the Christians. And so then Nero, in order to keep the farce going, the fake news going, he started persecuting Christians, rounding up Christians and causing them to be executed. And they had the games in the Colosseum and all the stuff that Nero did. It was because of Nero that both Peter and Paul were executed. And but we see that kind of persecution continued after Nero when Domitian. He was persecuting the Christians as well, and he persecuted John. John was in prison on the island of Patmos because of the persecution of Domitian. And then we see that from that point on down until about AD 325, Christians were generally persecuted by the Roman emperors until the time of Constantine. And the Emperor Constantine allegedly had a vision of a sign in the sky that said something like, by this sign you will conquer. And he was about to go into battle. Well, he put that sign on it was supposedly a Christian symbol. He put that sign on the shields of his soldiers, and they had a great victory in the battle. Well, after that, the Emperor Constantine wanted to make Christianity, which was sort of hated at the time and being persecuted by his predecessors, he wanted to use Christianity as a way to kind of bring his kingdom together and consolidate his power. And so he declared the Christian religion to be at least equal to the other Roman religions of the sun god and things of that nature. And he actually favored Christianity. And in 325, because there was a conflict in Christianity between certain segments concerning the nature of God and his Son, this is when the whole Trinitarian doctrine was sort of being formulated. And it had its opponents as well, and this was causing a big ruckus among the Christian bishops and Christian assembly, and Constantine didn't want that because he wanted to use Christianity to sort of bring together his kingdom, and so he decided that he needed to resolve this conflict, and so he inserted himself into Christian theology, and he convened the Council of Nicaea. And at that council, they were allegedly supposed to hammer out the doctrine of God and His Son, and to have and to settle the dispute. Well, we're not going to get into all that, but bottom line is they devised, between that council and a few after it, they devised the doctrine of the Trinity. And but the important point I want to make is that Constantine, once the Nicene Creed was established, even though much of Christianity did not agree with it, Constantine made it a law that you had to agree with it. And any Christian churches or houses of worship that would not go along with it, or that promoted any other interpretation of God and His Son other than what was embodied in the Nicene Creed, that they were to be persecuted. And so Constantine, while he allegedly stopped persecution of Christianity at large, he actually began a new kind of persecution of Christianity. He began the persecution of those who would not go along with his official merger of the Roman Catholic Church. This is how the Catholic Church really began. The Roman Catholic Church was by submitting to the emperor sort of leading the council while they hammered out this doctrine. And then he decreed, they made it official, he decreed under penalty of losing your job, losing your property, your home, your house of worship being confiscated by the Roman government, and in some cases even the death penalty or exile for those who would not go along with the new Nicene Creed. And there was a lot of persecution that followed of those who refused to go along with either with the emperor inserting himself in Christian theology, or with the consensus of the Nicene Council on the doctrine of the Trinity, as it evolved a little bit more even in the following councils and creeds. All right. So anyway, the point is that what you had was political Rome, the Roman Empire, that was the enemy of Christianity. All of a sudden, because of Constantine, and because Constantine stopped the persecution of his predecessor, and he elevated the bishops, especially the bishop in the church in Rome, elevated him to such a high position and gave gifts and honored them and gave them all kinds of positions and whatnot in the Roman government, made them rich, in effect. He spent a ton of money on churches and things like that to try to turn Christianity from, these little groups of people huddled in home assemblies, hiding from persecution, to turn them instead into his advisors and rulers alongside of him, religious rulers alongside of him in the kingdom. And he really bribed, I think, he bribed a lot of these church officials and so forth. And so look what we see here, the description of Mystery Babylon. She is God's battle axe against his own people, Jerusalem, but then she merges with the Christian church in Rome and becomes a prostitute, because you have the bishop and many church leaders after this sort of being married to the Roman state. You had a church state. And this is why, it's because of this merger between the enemy of Christ, which was the Roman government, and the Roman church. They merged together, and it became it became full of idolatry and what the Bible calls fornication and drunkenness. Again, drunkenness being self-deception. And when you look at Rome and the Roman Catholicism, it says here that she's adorned with, dressed in purple and red, and adorned with gold and valuable gems and pearls. I mean, just do a quick search. Go on Google and just do a quick search of the cardinals and bishops, the vestments, that is their clothing that cardinals and bishops wear when they're in their official councils and things of that nature. And what you will see is a sea of men dressed in red and purple robes. Just exactly what it says here, and they're adorned with gold and valuable gems, just like it says here. I mean, it's not that Roman Catholicism didn't invent that stuff. They simply borrowed all the royal vestments from the Roman, civil officials, from the emperor and things like that. They simply took upon themselves. These are supposed to be leaders and pastors of churches, and what are they doing? They're wearing the clothing of pagan Rome and the emperor and all that kind of stuff, and they're still doing it to this very day, because they have they have been elevated in their earthly power over these various nations, these peoples and languages and tongues and so forth. And that's why the woman is said to be sitting upon many waters, which are the peoples and the nations and so forth. Just do a quick survey of the history of Europe and Roman Catholicism and how Rome has dictated the rise and fall of different kings and kingdoms, and the amount of blood that has flown from the hand of the popes and the cardinals and the bishops and the priests as they persecuted anyone and everyone that would not go along with their church-state empire, all down through history. It's really, really, really remarkable. There's so many parallels in Revelation chapter 17 and in Rome and all that it has done. Now,